You're at the Coaching Inn, 3D Coaching's virtual pub, where we enjoy conversations with people who are engaged in the world of coaching.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Coaching Inn. I'm your host, Claire Pedrick, and today I'm delighted to be in conversation with Joe Merriweather. I think we met on LinkedIn, Joe, is that right?
That's right. Hi, Claire. So great to be here. Just saying, it feels kind of surreal, having been a consumer of your content and your books and your podcast for a while. So, but yes, I believe we met on LinkedIn when I think I probably tagged you in something that I'd learned from you. I would imagine, and now we're here. So, yeah, really pleased to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. And I think it was actually about something about democratizing coaching. And I just love that phrase.
Yeah, probably knowing me. I mean, that's kind of, I guess that's how I've entered this space. And that's kind of, I guess, how I see my role currently within the coaching world, which is very much, coming at coaching from a place of feeling really privileged to experience it pretty early on in my working world, and thinking, it is a great shame that so many people miss out on this. And so, that's kind of what's led me into where I am now, which is, really trying to work out how we can get coaching to people earlier on in their careers. And yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how quickly the space is evolving. I'm relatively new to the coaching world. I've only been in it for a few years, really. But even in that time, just seeing more and more things pop up, and obviously then with the advancements in all kinds of tech and the way the world's going, it's quite interesting. But yeah, that's my stance on coaching is really about, and I think it's why I engage so much with some of your content. It's really about how can we simplify it and how can we get it to people more easily, make it more accessible. Because when I entered the world of coaching, it really, what I noticed was I noticed two things. One is there's loads of coaching for senior people, which completely makes sense. But I just kept on seeing, there's loads of exec coaches, I guess you would call them, for senior leaders. And I think there's a range of reasons as to why that is, and we can go into that. But that was the first thing that I noticed. The second thing that I noticed was, it's something around language, and sometimes not being really clear what coaching is and what it isn't. And I love the way that you sometimes just simplify it down to being a helpful conversation that helps someone to move forwards, because I think there's all kinds of words that get thrown into the mix with marketing, and I think it can be complex out there. And so as someone who's relatively new to the space, those are the two things that I kind of, notice pretty quickly.
Interesting.
And sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I love that actually the insights of people who are new to the profession are really important, because you see things that people who've been in the profession for a long time don't see.
Yeah, I can imagine so. And I think, I guess just kind of circling back to that first point, it's one thing I really love is coaching people for their first time experiencing coaching, and just seeing or noticing the kind of the cogs turning, and the kind of realizations of, this is what this is. And I just love that. I've fallen in love with that process. And I think there are a range of challenges when it's someone's first time coaching. And I've definitely come up against some of those. But I think the kind of the overriding thing which is driving me at the moment is there's this thing, and it's really impactful, but it doesn't seem to be accessible to a lot of people. So how can I go about trying to do something to change that? and hopefully have impact for people, for businesses, and also on a selfish personal point of view. It's where I get quite a lot of fulfillment from. So those three things together, I'm hoping that's kind of what's that's what's driving me.
So lots for us to talk about today. And first, tell us a bit about you, Joe. Tell us about what got you into this coaching game.
Yeah, sure. So my background is in various different commercial roles, kind of sales roles within very early stage startups. So I entered the world of work not really knowing what I wanted to do, and just absolutely, I feel like it's quite classic, especially in sales roles, kind of fell into it. I knew someone who ran a sales team, and he said, "Oh, why don't you just come and join the team and we can see how it goes?" And that was my entry into the world. And I quite liked the idea of startups because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I liked the idea that in a startup, I felt like I would get exposure to lots of different areas of the business pretty quickly. And I always had a fear of having a really dull job. That's a really big fear of mine, being in a kind of a big corporate. I don't feel very like I resonate with kind of like a big corporate environment. So I think those are probably the factors that steered me into the world of startups. And then for about 5 or 6 years, I navigated the roller coaster world of ups and downs of startups, and some were really exciting and went well, and some did not go so well. And I've found that out the hard way sometimes. But eventually ended up at an ad tech business, so a business that would understand human behavior from large scale data and then use those understandings to plan and buy media campaigns. And kind of worked my way up there and ended up leading a sales team. And that was my first experience of what it's like to manage people and lead a team without really any guidance on or training on what to do. So my training really was my boss, who was great and is great, but he kind of said, just be a good human being. And that was kind of my training. And I think it's pretty good advice, but I also felt like, looking back, there was so much that I kind of missed, and I wish I could have changed had I had a bit more support and guidance around what it meant to be a manager and what it meant to be a leader. So that kind of brought me up to there. And then I ended up, I was speaking to someone about this the other day. What was the real inflection point of kind of shifting? And so I think that's this growing thing about, I really loved my one-to-ones. I really loved seeing my team do well, but I also kind of felt like I didn't really know what to do. I was kind of just going with it. But then there was a point where I was asked to be featured in some sort of online magazine for a salesperson within this industry, like a rising star or something like that. And I just thought, is this where I'm going? And I just didn't have a huge amount of passion or fulfillment or excitement to be going in that way. I think I really easily could, but I just felt like there's more. I think there's more. This isn't it for me. So long story short, I ended up stepping away from that role, and really fortunately, someone in my team, their mum is a coach. So he said, "Oh, you should have a chat with my mum." And I didn't really know what coaching was at that stage. I'd learned I'd learned a bit about kind of coaching skills when I was trying to be a better manager, but I'd never really experienced coaching. And I had a coffee with this person, and I left that conversation feeling full of energy and really positive and with a lot more clarity. And looking back on it, she was of course coaching me, but in the moment I just thought, oh, this is a nice coffee, and I'm speaking a lot, and now I feel amazing. And so that's really
a new definition.
Yeah. So that's kind of what led me on this path, and then
Yeah.
one thing led to another, and I ended up working for a leadership development business called Mavericks Unlimited, and ended up running some of the manager training part of that business. And then on the side, I was doing my coaching training. So I trained with a school called Animas. And then that's when I kind of really started to see actually that there isn't too much coaching lower down. It's all kind of held pretty senior positions. And so that's when I created my own coaching practice, which is called Great Talk. And then prior to where we are right now, was working with a business called Spinach, who were doing a very similar thing to what I was doing. And the founder said, hey, why don't we kind of combine our efforts? And so we did. And they have a really interesting model of one-off coaching sessions. So it's kind of like and that was really interesting. And I'm more than happy to talk about some of the learnings and the experiences from that kind of model as well. Unfortunately, we had to restructure that business. So now I'm doing some associate coaching for them, doing a bit of other coaching for the Mavericks team, and then I'm doing my own coaching through Great Talk. So it's a bit of a portfolio career, I guess you might say. But that kind of brings us up to where we are now.
Cool. Well, how many episodes shall we record today, Joe?
Well, how much time have you got? Got?
I think I would like to start this conversation with the first time, people coming to coaching for the first time, because that's a question we hear all the time. I think the exec coaching versus the rest is really interesting, because I think that's about reward. I think there are more executive coaches because executive coaches can charge more money. Sorry, that's very down to earth and basic. And also, I won't say the rest, but there is lots going on in my head right now at the moment as I'm thinking. Anyway, let's go to first time, people coming for the first time. There was an excitement as in your voice as you said that, and then you went, and there are some other things. Start with the excitement, and then let's talk about the other things.
Yeah. The excitement. The excitement is I think it's just about there's a few things. I think it's just firstly seeing someone experience what it's like to have their own quality time to do this kind of thinking, which they probably haven't had often in life, because we just go from work, from meetings to the pub, to the gym, to see our friends, and that's it. And so for the majority of people, it's actually just taking that time to really think on a deeper level, and kind of just watching that unfurl in front of me. I just take quite a lot from that for some reason. But the other thing I love, and I think I actually got this from you, and is there's obviously a balance between contracting and making sure expectations and there's having that alignment piece up front. But then I think there's also value in just jumping in and not trying to explain things, too far. And I love it when we get in, we just get in there, and then maybe there's something reflected back. Maybe it's a certain powerful question. And I love the first moment where they're really thinking, and it's and that might be like, and it's the head tilt up, and you can see the cogs turning, and I just love that, because I think like when I'm speaking out loud now, trying to work out why is it I love that. I think it's about impact. I think like that's where I think impact, that person, there's impact that's happening for that person, which otherwise would not maybe have happened. So I think that's what it's about for me is and then it's just the realization that they're going to be given more of this stuff, which is hopefully going to really help them to move forwards.
what a beautiful description of what you see and what you experience in that moment. And I agree with you. Getting straight in is really important, because we can cause all sorts of stasis, of stuckness. When I say to you, so Joe, before we start working, I need to explain a lot of rules to you. Now, of course, the first rule is there are no rules in what we're going to be doing, but this is a rule and you need to hear it's a rule. Secondly, I need to explain that coaching is very different from everything else that you've experienced, brackets, which you may very well not have experienced anyway.
Yeah.
And by the time, and then we say, so now tell me your whole story. So now by the end of session 1, they haven't experienced coaching at all. Except they think they have.
Yeah. I think it's such an art, and I think I'm still finding out or trying to piece together what is the most effective way of doing that piece. And I think what's really interesting is when some of that contracting is also done before the conversation.
Absolutely.
And that's what I found in the business that I was working in, where people can essentially just in the moment say, I want some coaching, and they get paired with a coach. There's no chemistry call. It's about trying to offer coaching in the moment. And I found sometimes that was really interesting, and sometimes it had its challenges. For example, if they'd missed certain pieces of context about what coaching is and what it isn't, and then suddenly you're paired with someone, you've got maybe 50 minutes, maybe half an hour, and it's likely that they've booked the session in a reactive manner rather than, oh, I want to work on something proactively. It's like, oh, I'm in absolute chaos here and I need help right now. And obviously that phrase, I need help, suggests the coach is going to be helping me by giving me advice. And so I found myself having to be quite, trying to be as efficient as possible with that contracting piece, but also not to take up too much time, because we might only have half an hour for that conversation. And I think it's a real art. I do. But yeah, I think coming back to the point, I have found myself, especially earlier on, kind of doing a lot of the work and getting myself all twisted up in, well, this is what it is, and it's kind of like this, but sometimes it might be like this. And I think there's real power in trying to distill that into only what they need to hear, and then entering the coaching conversation.
So one of the things that I hear most from people coaching people for the first time is a version of, they weren't expecting to have to do any work.
Right. Yeah.
And that comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but that's the kind of theme. Or either they weren't expecting to do any work, which I think is slightly easier, or they didn't want to do any work, or it appeared that they didn't want to do any work. So you've been immersed in lots of these conversations. So what do you notice, Joe?
What comes up for me is I'm quite fortunate in that I haven't had many who don't appear to want to do the work, or don't appear. Maybe that's the wrong phrase. Maybe it's more don't appear to. They seem relatively engaged in the conversation. I've heard of horror stories where, I say horror stories, that's quite strong. I've heard of challenges where people have been sent to coaching.
Yes.
Off you go, have this because you're not performing, and that I can imagine would be pretty challenging. But yeah, I mean, what have I noticed in terms of the work? I mean, I think there's a huge, that there is often just a sense of, and I think it's from how we're raised, right? With the education system, there's a teacher, they tell you what to do. There's a sports coach, they tell you what to do. I think we're brought up in, you get told what to do, and then you do it, and then that equals outcome. And I just think it's quite alien for people to suddenly like have to do that thinking. themselves. And so in a way, I'm not hugely surprised that people come to coaching who've never heard of coaching in this format and are a little bit, what that's actually, as I'm speaking, that's a phrase that comes up often at the end of these first coaching conversations when I ask them, what's coming up for them, or what did they notice, is they'll often say something like, "Oh, I didn't realize I could talk that much," or "I didn't think I was going to talk," or yeah. So I think there's a kind of shift in the way that people think. And I think in the first session, especially, coming back to that earlier point, I think I enjoy the kind of what I appear to be the cogs turning in their head as they discover what this process is like. So yeah, I think I often don't think it's that people don't want to do the work. I think it's that perhaps they're not used to doing the work.
Yeah. That's interesting. So what do you do?
Wow, isn't that the question? What do? I try to be as clear as possible at the start, and really when I'm contracting, really spell it out and give my clearest definition of what they might perceive a coach to be, and what coaching with me is like, and how it's different from that. And I kind of say very upfront, just so you know, I won't be giving you advice. This is not, and I'll kind of go through the spectrum from mentorship to therapy to coaching, and just try to get as clear as possible with that. So that's the first thing I do. What else do I do? I try to make it as a safe space as possible. I think sometimes people come in and quite understandably, it's a new experience. And so I try to kind of, create that psychological safety, create a really safe space where where they can feel like they can say whatever they want, which I think helps. And then something I think I've got, again, much better at, having engaged with your work, is just keep checking in throughout that session. And that's come with a little bit more experience, and, to be honest, a little bit more courage.
Yeah.
To go, hey, I just want to pause. I just want to make sure that we're both happy with how this is going. And yeah, so I think those things collectively are what kind of keep us on track, and hopefully help the thinker to feel safe to kind of lead and think.
Yeah.
But it is challenging, and especially in the other model I was talking to you about, where they just come in straight off the bat, without much context. I have had to. Some of those sessions, especially early on, were challenging, where I really had to say, I noticed you keep asking me for advice. And I've taken that to supervision. Like, how do I best handle that when they keep asking me for advice, and I just simply don't have the advice for them? And that's something that I think, I'm still working through. But I think it's much easier, especially when I have the relationship from the start, and can really set the guardrails, I guess, as to what coaching is and what it isn't. So those are a few of the things that I noticed. But yeah, the thing that really comes up for me is courage.
Yeah.
And I think it can take a lot of courage to to be able to kind of hold that boundary of what coaching is and what coaching isn't, especially when someone's really in a spot where they really need help. It takes courage to be like, just so you know, that's not my role here. I'm here to help you think, and where might you be able to get the information that you need, and to kind of keep that space there. So yeah, those are, but still very much navigating that and going through that, and learning what the best ways are to navigate that.
Nice. Can I put a build on what you just said? You
Please.
said that's not my role. I wonder what would be different if you said my role is to help you think. We can work out where you can get that other help.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
I think
I love that.
There's a book to be written. I think I've run
Yeah.
out. I don't think this will be my book, but there will be a book to be written about how to stop making people feel naughty. I think we accidentally make people feel as though they've done something wrong a lot in the way that we coach. And I don't think that's okay.
Can you say
well,
more?
So for example, you agree what the work is, and then it goes because that's what happens, right? So we agreed what the work was, and then 4 minutes later it went, and now it's not that at all.
Yeah.
And it's really, and that might happen in 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 20 minutes, but that is a normal thing.
Yeah.
And when a coach is sticking professionally to the contract or the right sizing or the agreement, they'll say, when we started, we said we were going to do this.
Yeah.
Which is received as, when we started, we agreed to do this, and now we're not. And that's a very bad thing. And you did that.
Yeah.
So there's a whole question about how do we normally manage the exit from the, and that's to ask the same question in a future focused way. So how are we doing? What's our question now? Has got no judgment in it. But in order to tick the boxes of professional accreditation, which you can do without doing that actually, or to stay with the rules we were taught, we drag them back to the beginning, which we'd already left, and come into the future, and then we go, let's go back to the beginning then. It's interesting. I'm going to run a class on deeper right sizing, which is just about the beginning. And I've probably said that out loud now because that will make me get it in the diary before this episode goes broadcast.
Oh, nice. Good. Just as you were speaking there, a lot of that resonates with. I've definitely seen myself, with all the best intention in the world. Yeah, try to check in on, or I actually have. I'm sure I've said, we started the session trying to focus on this, and now we're over here, and I have seen them go, and I know that look. I know that look. I've seen that look, and I want to. I kind of want to just dive through the screen and kind of give them a hug and say, this is not. It's not it's not a test. This isn't like a teacher pupil relationship. But
we make it so when they receive what we say in that spirit.
Yeah.
So if they think we're telling them off, we're telling them off, even though we're not telling them off.
Yeah. And actually what's just come up for me is, I think the word coach automatically, for most people, puts them up higher than the coachee. Because a coach is someone who knows what they're talking about. A coach is someone that might have experience, and so I wonder if, even before we've even got into the conversation, if you're thinking about someone that's having coaching for the first time, I'm going to work with this coach, and automatically I think you enter, in many cases, that relationship, especially if someone's quite junior. It's they're relatively early on in their career. I don't think it's a surprise that potentially they enter the relationship kind of maybe looking up slightly, and therefore can feel like that if the conversation is shifted.
which is why we need to speak English. Because
Mm.
or whatever our language of coaching is. Otherwise, it sounds as though we're doing something special, and then they special us. Let's move on, if we may, Joe.
Of course.
Onto the democratization of coaching.
Yeah.
I just love that as a concept. What's your hope?
Now, there's a question. My hope is that coaching becomes normalized for the majority of people. I come at coaching from a professional context, but actually when I'm saying that out loud, I really mean anyone, inside or outside of work. Yeah, my hope is that people get to that more people, a wider set of people, get to experience coaching. That's my hope.
So, what's the story you'll be telling when you're interviewed on a podcast in 20 years' time? And they say, Joe, you were a fundamental part of the democratization of coaching. What did you do?
I think I will probably say I'll probably say something like I was a driving voice at the start of when coaching was becoming more widely accessible, and hopefully through my own work offered more opportunities for people who wouldn't have experienced coaching to experience coaching.
Nice.
And therefore I would hope that then the impact is felt more broadly across the business, and that helped to kind of normalize or popularize coaching. And then I can't really speak for, the next from 5 to 15 years on, but I think that's kind of what I would hope to be saying. And I think there's also a piece there about, I think I've got to say, I feel really privileged and fortunate to have experienced coaching. Not only in that one small session, but I also had when I worked for the leadership development business, they paid for me to have 6 sessions of coaching with a highly experienced coach, which is really, really rare. And so I think there's also something about, I just feel hugely fortunate to have been given that. And yeah, I don't want to sound too grandiose, but I feel some sort of responsibility, or I feel like that I feel other people should be able to have that as well. So there's something there as well.
Yeah. So we'd love to hear a little bit about what are the drips that you're putting in place right now to get that journey moving on democratizing. What does that look like?
I think, if I'm really honest, I'm still figuring that out.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm still in the process of working out, what's the most effective model here, and how do I talk about this. I really do think it's an ongoing process. Some of the things I'm doing, I think one is trying to be flexible with how I work with people to make it as accessible as possible.
Nice.
So whether that's just a one-off session or whether that's for 6 sessions, I work with businesses in a few different ways. And one way which has been really exciting more recently is they simply just put me on so each person gets a small amount of budget to spend on their own personal learning and growth. And so they put me on their kind of portal, and I've basically kind of created a new working coaching model deflects to that system. There's obviously pros and cons to being so flexible, and I'm kind of weighing all that up as I grow and develop. I think that flexibility is quite important, because I believe I kind of in some way have to meet the buyer or the end user where they are. I think that's obviously one of the biggest barriers to the more formal sense of coaching. That's one thing. I think another thing is simply trying to talk about it. I think language is incredibly important. And I think sometimes I have seen, I've got to be really careful here, because I think coaches are really passionate about the work they do, and they're really passionate about the impact of the work that they do. And I think language often reflects that.
Yeah.
But I think, especially when I'm trying to appeal to people who have never heard of coaching, like big, profound words like unleashing potential and limiting beliefs and all these terms that coaches love and use, I'm not sure how helpful they are for someone who might be on the edge of coaching, and they might have a bit of budget to spend, and they kind of want to, okay, I want to work on myself, and then they might click onto a bit more information about me, and so trying to kind of make language as simple as possible,
Absolutely,
is another piece there as well, I think.
Yeah. And I think we have to speak in the language that is understandable to the people that we're talking to. You've pressed a button for me when you said limiting beliefs, because I hate that phrase. Because if you're in dialogue with somebody and they go, do you know, I keep falling over that, or do you know, that happens again, am I stopping myself doing something? And you can say, do you want to work on that? And they go, yeah. That's a language that people understand. Otherwise, it's like you're telling them, you're saying, let's have a list of things that are wrong with you. Like going to the doctor and they give you a list. These are the following conditions that we might want to talk about. Hyper something, something. And you look at it and you go, oh no, what's wrong with me? Yeah. Whereas if you go to the doctor and say, I'm struggling with my breathing, they'll help you work that through in English. Well, good doctors will help you work that through in a language that you understand.
Yeah. I resonate so much with that. And as a coach that's relatively early on in their careers in coaching, I definitely have to catch myself from trying to sound clever and trying to sound bigger and better than, I often have to catch myself, because maybe I'm writing up a proposal for something and I might put in some of those words and I go, oh, hang on, does this make sense for someone who has no idea what coaching is? It's funny, actually, I often, this isn't always the case, but I have found sometimes females put themselves forward for coaching more than men.
Oh.
And I really enjoy coaching guys, because sometimes I get the impression that they're less open and they're further away from wanting to explore themselves and explore whatever coaching is. And so I especially have found, for example, if I'm in the pub and I'm chatting to some guys, and it might be about, not to be stereotyping, but it might be about some sport or kind of surface level things. And when they're asking about coaching, that's a prime example of when I've really had to work on simplifying the explanation of what coaching is. But I think ironically it's complex, because naturally I want to demonstrate, its impact and again, I think it's the art, isn't it? It's the art of simplifying things to make them as impactful as possible. But yeah, anyway, I've definitely found myself using all kinds of words to overstate or try to make myself sound bigger or better than I think what actually is. I'm relatively conscious of it now, but I still find myself going into that mode
we've all
sometimes.
done that sometimes, Joe.
Yeah. And I think there's another piece here, which is perhaps a separate conversation. It's around, the marketing around coaching.
Yeah.
And, and so I think that's often blended with how we talk about coaching. And, I guess I think coaches are having to balance, being authentic and trying to be trying to simplify what coaching is, but also trying to sell something, and trying to sell a journey and trying to sell an outcome. And, I guess it's trying to find that constant balance, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, Joe, we'll have to have you back.
Would love to, Claire. It's been such a, honestly, I've I, as someone who's relatively new to the space, I'm so grateful that I found you and your work, because as someone who is relatively new, it's so refreshing and energizing to have just to have someone speak about coaching in such an articulate but simplifying way. It's really energizing. So I'm really grateful that I've found you in your work, and really really grateful to have been invited to come on here. So thank you.
It's been great to talk to you. So how do people contact you if they want to find out more, Joe?
So best way is probably LinkedIn. So just find me on LinkedIn under Joe
I'll put your
Merriweather.
LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thank
you. The other way is to email me at Great Talk. So it's Joe at greattalk.co.uk.
That's a great that's a great domain name. Just FYI. Greattalk.co.uk sounds fabulous.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Joe, for coming. If you want to subscribe or follow, you'll get every episode as they download. And we've got some goodies. We've got a free month in our supervision community, and I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to try us out. See you next time. Bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we'd love you to share the podcast with a friend or leave a comment on social media. And if you'd like to become a regular at the Coaching Inn, you can subscribe on Podbean and all major podcast channels. We look forward to welcoming you next time. You've been listening to The Coaching Inn, 3D Coaching's virtual pub. For more information, check out 3dcoaching.com.